Hey, what's up guys, it's Mike with Alpha Reptile, back with another video today. Today, we're going to be talking about Uromastyx care and why you should own a Uromastyx. For those of you that are tuning in during May Madness, what's up everybody? It's the third day of May Madness. In this video specifically, we're going to be covering Uromastyx jeri, also known as the Niger or Saharan Uromastyx. There are two different color morphs. I have both an orange and a yellow. They are the same species. They can interbreed. It doesn't like muddle up the colors if you breed them together. So they are the same species. I'll mention it again later in the video when I cover the cage setup, but if you are here to learn how to like set up a cage, then you're going to want to click on one of the top corners right here. This basically is me setting up the cage behind me and where I keep my two Uromastyx. Now before we get too far into this video, I want to let you guys know that if you guys are looking for some of the specific products that I recommend, or just the stuff that I use and whatnot, I'll leave a couple links in the description down below to Amazon. I do get a little kickback if you guys decide to use it, so if you're looking to support me in other ways, that's one way you can do it. And along this vein of like, before we get too far into the video, I also wanted to mention that I'm going to be posting on Instagram every single day during May as well. So not only do you guys get a video, but you can follow me on Instagram, links down here, as well as in the description for you guys to check out. Now that I've mentioned the shameless plugs, I do want to get into the natural history of Uromastyx. Uromastyx are found across many different countries in Africa. The Uromastyx jeri, or the Niger Uromastyx like we're talking about in this video, is found in Algeria, Mali, and Niger. Their actual abundance in those ranges is relatively low. They occur throughout tens of thousands of square kilometers in those countries, and they have an incredibly wide range. They're just found in lower numbers. The natural habitat for these awesome creatures are actually extremely rocky outposts, so they're going to be kind of hilly type structures with mostly rock, as well as some compact layers of sand and dirt. In these rocky outcrops, they make long tunnels and stay in those tunnels most of their lives. They do come out, obviously, pretty much daily, but that is kind of their home base for them to reside in. And they're profound diggers, so that's definitely something to keep in mind when you're setting up your Uromastyx tank. Now the Saharan or Niger Uromastyx is one of the smaller species of Uromastyx. I guess it's more mid-range. They get to be about 35 centimeters on average, which is about 13 inches or so. Obviously there is some variation up and down from that average measurement, but you're looking at about an animal that gets a foot long. The lifespan on these guys actually isn't like super well known. Based on the papers that I read and the CITES permits that were given, they're known to be about 20 years in captivity after being wild caught. You can guess with that knowledge that their average lifespan is between 20 and 25 years old, probably stretching into the 30s. Something that's a little lesser known in the hobby is that the adults are typically obligate vegetarians or obligate herbivores, which means they will only eat vegetation and vegetative matter, so seeds, vegetation, the leafy greens and stuff, and that's it. But what a lot of people don't mention is that the offspring, the young, the juveniles, if you will, are typically omnivorous and will eat actually a substantial amount of invertebrates and insects. That's even something that I learned while researching for this video. And considering I'm about to have Uromastyx babies, that's good knowledge. Now, on a slightly more sad note, I suppose, Uromastyx are one of the more regularly wild-caught animals in the hobby, but Uromastyx are still one of those creatures that are regularly imported from overseas and Europe especially. And when I was researching, I saw the amount of individuals imported from 1994 to 2003 was over 33,000 individuals. That's a lot of wild capture. Those individuals were actually captured from Nigeria and Mali. There's none being exported from Algeria. But after being able to dig up some of the numbers from the past couple years, the numbers or the quota, so the CITES quota, how many animals are allowed to be let out of the country, it was 0 for Nigeria in 2017, and a couple years before that, it was about 2,000 individuals from both Nigeria and Mali. So with that knowledge now, I encourage you guys to find captive bred individuals. A lot of times captive bred will be more expensive than the wild caught ones you see at stores. Wild caught ones will typically be more skittish, less apt, can come in with parasites, all that kind of stuff that you guys don't want. So if you want to set yourself up for success, I encourage looking for captive bred individuals. Okay, now you guys have heard about the natural history. You've heard about kind of the downside in most of them being wild caught, but now you've still decided that Uromastyx are still one of the coolest beginner reptiles out there, and you want to keep one. I'm here to share my experience with you guys, as well as share the collective experience from many different people around the world. Just before we get into care, I do want to reiterate that this is for the Uromastyx jeri, or the Niger Uromastyx. I know I've said that numerous times, but I do want to say that a lot of these care tips actually are mostly universal throughout all Uromastyx. The one thing that you always hear about Uromastyx is their heat requirements, and that is pretty much universal across all Uromastyx. That's also one of the most challenging things for Uromastyx, in my opinion, is the ability to provide heat. Now, everybody says that it's so hot, but what's hot? What's hot to Uromastyx? Hot spots in a Uromastyx tank should be at minimum 120 degrees Fahrenheit or 48 degrees Celsius, and maximum you want them to be at about 140 degrees Fahrenheit or 57 degrees Celsius. You guys can see in here that I have my own rigged up heating elements for my Uromastyx. I have the metal one is a deep heat projector by Arcadia. It is incredible and it's only 50 watts. And the other bulb is a 50 watt intense basking bulb from Exoterra. Now, something that you'll notice throughout this video, and you'll probably have seen while you're watching me, is that the lights turn on and off, and that is because I emphasize the necessity of a thermostat. Whether it's an Exoterra thermostat or the Inkbird thermostat that I have, both are great and both will work for this purpose, but you need to make sure that you have a thermostat, especially with the heating setup that I'm going for, but I recommend it for all heating elements. Now, why is that? That is because the heating elements in here, before I got my animals, I wanted to see how hot they could get. And I found that leaving them on for about 10 hours, at the 10-hour mark on the basking spot, it was 179 degrees Fahrenheit. I have no idea how hot that is in Celsius. I'm not even gonna look it up, but that's really hot. So you do need to make sure that you have a thermostat for these guys, because it is essential in not cooking them. Something that I also wanted to mention is the way that these are set up. You can see that they are separate, so they don't make one little tiny focal spot of heat. They distribute heat more evenly across the body of a Uromastyx. As you get larger and larger animals, this becomes more and more important. The Egyptian Uromastyx, which is the largest of them, would need 2 to 3 heat bulbs just to evenly disperse the heat throughout its body, rather than one gigantic heat bulb with a tiny little basking point. The tiny little basking point that is created would burn the animal, and it would not be pretty. Now that you've heard some information about the basking temperatures, obviously the ambient temperatures are going to follow that. So that is the air temperature both around the heat as well as to the cold side of the tank. You want your ambient temperatures to be around the heat bulbs around 110 degrees Fahrenheit, grading all the way down to about 85 degrees Fahrenheit on the cool side. One of the keys to reptile keeping, and especially to keeping Uromastyx, is using one of these guys. This is just a temperature gun, so you basically point it at your hotspot or wherever in the cage, and it reads you the temperature. Something to keep in mind is that you have to be relatively close to the hotspot for it to get a really accurate reading, but even about 12 inches away or 30 centimeters away is enough to get a relatively accurate measurement. So these are definitely something that I would recommend picking up. Again, links to all this kind of stuff will be in the description. Now, because we are talking about heating and lighting, I will go into some UVB guidelines. Uromastyx are an arid desert type animal and require relatively high levels of UVB exposure. So one of the best ways, and really the only way that I'd suggest providing that, is with the use of linear T5 high output bulbs. I would recommend, depending on the setup, I'll go into that in a second, I would recommend the Arcadia 12% UVB bulb, or the 10% one. Alternatively, if those are a little hard to find for you guys, the ZoomEd 10.0 linear T5 high output bulb is definitely a solid alternative. UVB meters are a great tool to have. They're expensive, but they are very useful. One of the reasons I kind of hesitate to provide a concrete, like, this is what you need for UVB exposure is because everybody has a different setup. Everybody has different cage designs. Maybe some are going through a mesh lid, which filters out about 20 to 30% of UVB. Some people are like me, where the UV is mounted right inside the tank, hence why I don't need quite as intense of a bulb to produce UV for my little Uromastyx back there. Make sure you do your research, figure out what your setup is going to be, and try and get educated about UVB and providing proper amounts of UV for your animal. Now, one of the final, I guess, requirements in keeping Uromastyx is going to be their cage and their cage setup in general. Their habitat is something that's kind of controversial, just in the size of tank, in my opinion. And my opinion is that a 4 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot is the perfect size for one and maybe two individuals if you have enough space to have a second tank in case there's some fighting. I think an absolute essential part of that kind of 4 by 2 by 2 is a 4 foot by 2 foot area. The height isn't quite as important. Like, my one behind me is 48 by 24 by 18 inches. So it's 4 feet by 2 feet by 18 inches tall. I would strongly recommend the use of either a PVC cage or a wood cage because I find it extremely hard to provide the proper temperatures in a cage with an open mesh top. That's just because their temperatures need to be so high, and even the cool side still needs to be relatively warm, typically quite a bit more warm than your ambient room temperature. A bonus of the wood and PVC cages is that it doesn't let heat escape through the top, so it's not going to lead to evaporative cooling or anything like that. It's just going to be a really hot habitat for them, and that's kind of what they need. The absolute smallest tank, and it pains me to say this, I would keep a Niger Uromastyx in is a 36 by 18 by 18 Exoterra. Try to not do that, but I guess if you're into bare minimum keeping, go for it. In terms of cage decor and how I set up my tank, I will link again the link to the setup video up in one of those two corners up there. That way you guys will know how the whole process goes. There's a lot of things to consider when setting up a cage, especially with natural rocks in there. But in a tank, I would strongly recommend having a nice flat basking area for them, as well as some rocks for them to climb on and hide throughout. And their more natural behaviors lead them to run in and amongst the rocks. I did want to touch a little bit more in depth on Substrate, and that is because it is a hot topic again when it comes to Uromastyx keeping. I have my own opinions. I'm definitely a more naturalistic keeper, hence why I keep mine on a clay, soil, and sand mixture, so it provides a nice sturdy substrate for them to walk on, as well as they can dig. I also, in the one corner, have a lay bin slash digging bin that's just filled with coconut core sand. It keeps relatively high humidity, and it allows the female to dig and lay her eggs. I do have a clutch already for my females, so it seems to work. It also lets the male exhibit some more natural tendencies of burrow making and digging. Some of the substrates that are commonly recommended that I wouldn't really recommend are the seed substrates. That's because Uromastyx are natural seed eaters, and they will just constantly consume seeds, which really isn't great for them. It leads to a lot of overweight animals and just generally unhealthy. I also was talking to one of my friends, and he mentioned that it could be not so great on their joints as well, just because there's no resistance to it. It'd just be like you're almost stepping to the bottom of the cage every single time that you take a step. Think of it like us running on a really dry, sandy beach. It's really hard to get any traction, and for how much effort you put into there, you're not going very far. Do it if you want, but I would just recommend having a more natural setup. Another thing that I would recommend not doing is keeping them on any of the calci sand products, anything like that, as well as any wood shavings as substrate. Generally not recommended. But everyone, that's going to wrap up the video today. I hope you guys enjoyed my care of the Niger Uromastyx, as well as kind of Uromastyx in general. but specifically the Saharan, Niger, Uromastyx geri, whatever you want to call it. It's up to you. They're all the same. But I did want to mention, if I didn't answer your question, or if you have Uromastyx and you're having issues with it, anything like that, make sure you leave it in the comment section down below, or send me an email, or send me a DM on Instagram, or a Facebook message. Get in contact with me. I'll do my best to answer your question. I do ask that you leave general cage size, what you've been feeding it, how hot the basking temperatures are, just general information about your setup. That way I can give a more educated guess as to what might be going on with your animal. I'm just going to leave you guys with a closing thought that probably half of you will love, half of you will hate. But my general thoughts on Uromastyx is that they're just a better bearded dragon. They don't have the disgusting poops. They're in general just as friendly and slightly more active, and they're almost strict vegetarians. So take that for what you will, but that's my opinion. Now, with that said, feel free to leave a like on this video if you learned something or just enjoyed the content you saw. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, leave them in the comment section down below. I reply to every single comment. If you want to see more May Madness, if you're watching this during May Madness, make sure you click that subscribe button. You will not miss a single day. And if you want to see more reptile, fish, amphibian videos in the future, definitely make sure you click that subscribe button. Anyways, with that said, that's going to do it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and we'll catch you in the next one. Later.